North Korea, under the regime of Kim Jong-un, is a country known for its extreme isolation and highly restrictive laws. However, some of these rules go beyond the expected control of an authoritarian regime, reaching the point of being bizarre and incomprehensible to the rest of the world. From the prohibition of unauthorized haircuts to the banning of jeans, the North Korean government imposes restrictions that seem absurd but are part of a larger strategy of total control over the lives of its citizens. As we delve into the strangest laws and unusual bans, it becomes evident how deeply the state interferes in unimaginable areas, reflecting an unrelenting desire to keep the population submissive. If this topic intrigued you, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and activate notifications. This way, you won't miss any content about the curiosities and hidden realities of the world's most closed regimes. Emergency codes on flights. On North Korean flights, pilots and flight attendants use secret codes to communicate emergencies without alarming passengers. Code 7500 is used in cases of hijacking, 7600 indicates radio communication failures, and 7700 is intended for general emergencies. These codes are kept strictly confidential, reflecting the control that Kim Jong-un's regime exerts over all aspects, even in aviation. The goal is to prevent any critical situation from causing panic among citizens who have no access to information about what is happening. This policy reinforces the government's system of censorship and oppression. Even in moments of danger, the authorities prioritize absolute control of the situation, ensuring that everything remains hidden from passengers and the general population. You snooze, you lose. Music. In 2015, North Korean Defense Minister Hyun Yong-chol was executed for dozing off during a military rally. The regime interpreted this as an act of insubordination and disrespect, which culminated in his death. This episode highlights the extreme level of intolerance of the North Korean government toward any misstep. The severe punishment for something as simple as falling asleep makes it clear that the regime does not tolerate weaknesses or any behavior that does not fully comply with the rules. Hyun's public execution was also used as an example for other government members, reinforcing the constant atmosphere of fear in which those who serve the state live. Even small mistakes can have lethal consequences. Bicycle restriction. For many years, bicycles were banned from the streets of Pyongyang, the capital of North Korea. The government insisted that citizens use motor vehicles, but most of the population could not afford them. This prohibition created an absurd situation where many citizens were limited in their mobility, even for simple daily tasks. The use of bicycles, a practical and affordable solution, was seen by the regime as unsuitable for the capital. Although this rule has been relaxed over time, it reflects the disconnect between the government's policies and the reality of the population. The regime imposes restrictions that often make no practical sense but serve to reaffirm its control. Are you finding this interesting? Then, leave your like to support the channel and comment on what surprised you the most so far. Your participation is super important. Clothing dictatorship jeans were completely banned in North Korea starting in 2020, viewed as a threat for representing Western influence. Kim Jong-un's regime considers jeans a symbol of capitalism, especially American capitalism. This prohibition is part of a larger effort to eliminate any trace of foreign influence in the country. The North Korean government fears that such influences could undermine its authority or spark cultural rebellions among the population. By controlling even what people can wear, the regime reinforces its presence in all spheres of life. The ban on jeans is a way to ensure that citizens remain in conformity with the state's ideals. Haircuts. In 2013, the North Korean government determined that only 28 styles of haircuts were allowed in the country. The intention behind this measure was to control foreign influences, which could corrupt socialist values. Young people, in particular, are required to cut their hair every 15 days to ensure they don't exceed the maximum length of 8 centimeters. This reinforces the idea that even personal aspects of life are under state control. The control over appearance reflects the regime's attempt to standardize the population. Any trace of individuality can be seen as a threat to the government's ideology, which preaches total submission to the state and its leader. Cell phone offense. Making international calls in North Korea is one of the most serious offenses a citizen can commit. Communication with the outside world is strictly prohibited, and anyone caught may even face the death penalty. The government justifies this measure as a way to prevent external information from reaching the country and weakening state propaganda. The regime fears that the population will gain access to data that contradicts the official version of events. This type of rigid control over communication is a clear example of how the North Korean government isolates its population from the rest of the world. The state uses fear as a tool to keep everyone away from any contact with reality beyond its borders. State-owned properties in North Korea. All properties are owned by the state. Citizens cannot buy or sell houses, and permission to live in Pyongyang, the capital, is granted only to the most loyal to the regime. Any attempt to trade property is illegal, but bribes are common to bypass this rule. Even so, the country's real estate system reflects how the North Korean government keeps its population under total control. By controlling where people can live, the government limits the social and geographic mobility of citizens. This ensures that only those considered trustworthy by the regime have access to benefits like living in the capital. No joy allowed in North Korea. Smiling on certain dates, such as July 8th, is prohibited. This date marks the anniversary of the death of the country's founder, Kim Il-sung, and showing sadness and mourning is mandatory. Recently, the government also imposed an 11-day ban on smiling to honor the 10th anniversary of Kim Jong-il's death. This rule exemplifies how the regime controls even the emotions of its population. The imposition of national mourning on these specific dates reinforces the personality cult that is central to the North Korean regime. Citizens are required to follow these strict guidelines under the threat of severe punishments. Limited connection internet access is virtually non-existent for the majority of the North Korean population. Only a small elite has access to the global internet, while the rest of the population can only use the state-controlled intranet, called Kwangmyong. This internal network contains about 5,500 government-approved sites, all monitored and censored. Any attempt to access external information is severely punished, reinforcing the population's isolation. Control over information is one of the most powerful ways to keep the regime in power. By limiting the knowledge that citizens can acquire, the government ensures that its version of reality remains uncontested. Media ban: North Korea has only 4 television channels, all controlled by the government. The programming is entirely dedicated to glorifying the regime, with constant propaganda praising the leader and the country's political system. Foreign media is strictly prohibited, and possessing films or series from other countries can result in severe punishments, including executions. This policy is part of an effort to prevent the population from being exposed to other cultures or political systems. Media control is an essential tool for keeping the population isolated and aligned with state propaganda. By eliminating any alternative source of information, the government ensures that the regime continues to be seen as the only possible truth. Life in North Korea is shaped by a set of rules that defy common logic, imposing strict control over trivial and daily aspects. From clothing restrictions to the control of emotions, the North Korean regime demonstrates its intolerance of any form of individual freedom. The question arises, what would it be like to live in an environment where every detail of your life is monitored and dictated by an authoritarian government? With so many bizarre prohibitions, North Korea makes us reflect on the value of freedom and the dangers of excessive state control. If this topic intrigued you, subscribe to the channel and activate notifications to explore more about closed regimes and their impacts.